Welcome back, everyone, to the T.R.O.N podcast. This is your host, Rashad Woods. Today on our show, I have a very special guest. He's the director of the Michigan chapter of the UFOs Network, Mr. Bill Konkolesky. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rashad.
Admit, your background and what you've done over the last few decades, actually, when it comes to UFO. Now, do they call it UFO or UFA now?
Well, UAP is the alternative term, and that's for currently, because it started off as unidentified aerial phenomenon. Now it's unidentified anomalous phenomena. I prefer UFO. I'm a bit old school that way. UAP, I guess, is a broader umbrella, which encompasses a lot more things. UFO tends to be very specific in what it's trying to describe. It's a flying object, and it might not be flying. It might be on the ground. It might not be an object. It could be something without a shape, or it could be just light. So, I mean, I guess UAP is a little closer to a common generalized term for it. But again, I'm old school, so I like UFO.
Got it. So I had a chance to look at some of the segments that you had on Abduction Chronicles, and it looks like your first instance with UFOs was when you were about 8 years old, 7 years old, in your bedroom when.
Okay, so actually, my very first memory in life at age 2, I did have a very dramatic encounter at age 7. But just rewinding a bit to when I was 2, it was nighttime. I was in my crib. A little gray guy came into my room, giant black wraparound eyes, and just stared down at me, and I screamed for my parents, and my mom in the other room told me to go to sleep, like she thought I was having a bad dream or just fidgeting or something like that. And so my parents didn't come in, and after a while the being just was like, okay, it felt satisfied, and then walked out of the room. And that was, again, my very first memory in life. It wasn't anything playful or abstract. It was this very specific moment.
Okay. What city was that in Michigan?
Sterling Heights.
And so.
Okay, so this one's much more in depth, and I can definitely walk through it. I was in bed, and I woke up to this sort of tingling feeling all over. And I look, and there's this hole in the ceiling above me. And it's very strange, obviously. You're still, when you're like 7, you're still at an age where weird things can happen that you've never seen before, and you just sort of say, okay, that's new in life. I'm going to roll with it. So here's this thing. I'm like, I have no idea why it's there, how it could have got there. But then this metal sort of hose or cable, drops out of it and starts whipping around really quickly. And I can really feel the energy start to build up. And then I felt just this big, powerful sort of vibration in me. And suddenly I'm in this small room, and it's got this sort of dark light in it. And there's these 2 little guys in there. The ones that I had seen before, about 3 feet tall, super thin, the big eyes. And I got the feeling that I was being cleansed somehow. Like this was kind of like their mud room on board a craft, if you will. And so I was being, taking any germs on me or whatever I felt. That was what they were doing. And then the door opens, and they lead me into the next room. And I see this slab in the middle of the room that I interpret to be a doctor's bed. I'm like, oh, they're going to want me to go on this bed. Very sparse room, very brightly lit. Nothing that I could look at and say, oh, I understand what that is. Like that's like this type of tool or that type of storage or whatever. Then there's 3 of them now in this room. The 2 of them when they let me in. There was a third one there. And then there were 2 doors, one on the left and one on the right. The beings got up and walked through the left door and then left me alone. I'm like, well, that's very interesting that they would leave me alone. And so they went through the left door, so I went through the right. And I found myself walking along a long, narrow, curved hallway. And then I got to the end of the hallway, and there was this room, and I looked in the room. It was a very small room. There was some kind of mechanical contraption in it. The closest analogy I could think of was like a furnace, something like that. And then I came out of the room and looked back, and then the 3 of them were there, just kind of casually following me. Like they realized what I did, realized I probably couldn't do a whole lot of damage or go anywhere. So they were just curious, like, okay, we'll
Yeah.
follow them. And so when I turned back, they let me into a side room that was in that hallway. And then when we went in there was another being just like them, but like a couple feet taller. This one was like about
Okay.
5 feet. These little guys are about 3 feet, and this one that was 5 feet wanted me to sit in this chair that was very much like a dentist's chair. And I did, and I felt stuck to the chair immediately. There weren't any clasps or anything to physically hold me, but I just felt magnetically attached to this
Right.
chair. And so the being came and he went right into my face very closely and said, "Be very good and you'll get to see the color blue." And I was like, as a kid, you want a a sucker or a sticker or something
And
like
these
that.
things are speaking English, just so I'm clear about that. You can perfectly understand.
It's all
Okay.
telepathic.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
all telepathic. The little ones didn't actually ever
Okay.
say anything, but the taller one was
Okay.
communicative. And it seemed like it was very similar to the other ones, but not exactly the same as
Right.
the other ones. This one had an ability to communicate and I guess connect with people in a way that the smaller
Okay.
ones couldn't. And so then I said it got in my face. Be really good. You get to see the color blue. And then I felt a sharp pain on my right arm. I looked down. There's now a slice
Oh
on
my.
my arm, and I'm looking at it. As I'm looking at it, it's actually starting to heal up right as I'm watching it, which is strange. I didn't see
Good.
what cut it. I have no idea why
Right.
it's healing. So I look back up at the being, and it's got his face in mine again, and pardon me, it doesn't say anything, but its eyes turn from a deep black to a bright, like cerulean blue, a very bright backlit blue, and I'm being pounded with this bright blue light from its
Mm-hmm.
eyes, and it was actually relaxing. It was tranquilizing,
Right.
mesmerizing. I was lost in this sort of field
Yeah.
of blue. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up the next day, and the first thing I look down and I see that scar there that wasn't there the day before. And I went around to my brothers. I have four
Right.
older brothers and my parents. And I'm like, "Do you have any idea how I got this? I've never seen it before." Just in case that somehow I may have gotten it some other way, and none of them could remember it. And my mom was particularly surprised. She's like, "Oh, that's a pretty big scar." And she's like, "You would have remembered getting
Right.
that." I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So then later in the afternoon that same day, I'm in the backyard playing with the little boy across the street was a year younger than me. So I'm 7, he's 6. We're just climbing the trees in my
Yeah.
backyard. And this mist rolls into the backyard. This sort of cloud, this mist just comes in. And I thought at first, oh, is it a fire? Is it somebody's
Of course.
barbecue?
Of
What's
course.
going on? And then when it hits me, it's cool, like a fog machine cool. And I'm like, this is strange. And then inside of it was a gray guy, and he says to me, are telepathically, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he seemed satisfied, and he kept walking. And the mist rolled with him, and he went into the next yard, and then
Now,
kept
was there
going.
any other young kid with you at the time who saw that?
Yeah. Yes. So my friend from
Yeah.
across the street, he saw the mist. We both remember it, and I'm still in
Yeah.
touch with him, and he still remembers it, but he did not see the little being.
So obviously you're seeing these, and I hate to. I'm going to be respectful when I ask this. Is when you started telling people, do they think this was a product of a kid's a kid's imagination, overactive imagination, and is it kind of this way you see it, like almost in TV or movies where mom, dad, I saw this, brother, I saw this, and then people weren't really, thinking that you were telling the truth,
Oh
right?
yeah.
That had to have been frustrating. Imagine.
Yeah, yeah. There was definitely that element to it. A thing about my household was I have my four brothers are all
Okay.
older than me. My two oldest brothers and I could go toe to toe in a strange and crazy happened to me
Got it.
contest. Then the next two brothers, between them, zero
Really?
experiences, not a single thing, not even being around one of the others
Right.
of us in the instant that something
Yeah.
was happening. And my oldest brother's like 11 years
Okay.
older than me, and then 10. They're all like about a year apart, and then there's a gap, and then I came along. But so there was a household rule because weird stuff runs on my mom's side of
Right.
the family. And so I have lots of cousins with weird stuff happening to them too. But there was a house rule that they can be supportive of me when I said stuff, but they couldn't share their own stuff with me. They didn't want to influence me, they didn't want to
Oh,
scare
wow.
me, but they could be supportive of me. And so it wasn't until I was, in the middle school, high age that they started
To
to,
start to
to share
open up a
some of the
little bit
weird
more.
things. Yeah, and so I was never like pushed away or
That's okay.
ridiculed or told, no, that's impossible. It's always just like, oh, that's
Right.
very
Positive
interesting. Okay,
reinforcement. That's, and I only ask because it's such an open ended. You don't know how that could be received when you tell your parents or your siblings. So
hmm
do they, based upon your experiences and what you've seen, and I got just a couple questions. This is so fast. This is very fascinating. Did you find out it was exclusively that they were targeting you, or did you have any other people in the neighborhood? Was there an age? Was there a reason that this was happening particularly to you? Were you researching them, and were you researching phenomena, and they felt that there was a connection of some sorts?
I always like to say that UFOs had an interest in me before I had an
Okay.
interest in them. So it runs on my mom's
Right.
side of the family, and so I think I just sort of
Right.
inherited it. And the number of people that this happens to, I think, is widely underreported. So I'm not like one of like a
Right.
few. I'm one of probably maybe even several hundreds of thousands
Right.
of people. So it's rare, but I don't necessarily feel like special, like I'm one of, the
Right.
aliens came down and said out of 8 billion people, that kind of a thing. It's just there's a minority of people, sure, but at this point it's a community because the internet allows people to sort of get together. And I always say there's sort of three ways you can be indoctrinated,
Mhm.
onboarded, excuse a pun, into this sort
Right.
of phenomena. One is if it runs
Right.
in your family. One is if you are around somebody who has this type of phenomena
Right.
happen to them long enough times, you'll start to have things happen to
Okay.
you too. I've had it sort of rub off on friends of mine. And then the other is, and this one's maybe a bit more rare, like if an experiencer, which is sort of a kinder way to say
Right.
abductee, lives in a particular house for a long time, there's sort of a residual there. And if they move out, something can possibly happen to the new homeowners. I've seen that happen
Oh my goodness.
twice. So, yeah, it's kind of like almost like a disease, almost. You kind of catch
Okay.
it. You could catch it genetically
Yeah.
or be around somebody or leave the
Right.
residue and somebody else picks it up. But it's very strange for somebody who's outside of childhood to start having these type of
Okay.
phenomena. If somebody says I was in my 20s when it started happening to me, what I hear is that there were probably several things that happened to them when they
Mm-hmm.
were younger and they just don't remember it. I'm not going to jump to assumptions and say I know that's the case, but based upon the pattern I
Right.
see, it very rarely starts to happen to somebody later in life unless one of those causes, like they're around somebody that it happens
Okay.
to.
So that okay, so there's usually some sort of childhood event that happened. They may not have a good memory of it, and then when they're older and they have a better memory, or it's more recent to them, then you kind of push it to the back end of their mind. They're like, "Oh, this just started happening." That's based on some of your experiences. That's very interesting. So my next question would be, and I'm just jumping a little bit, is the senatorial hearings, where did that kind of feel like validation from all the things that you said that you've seen or experienced, and then last year they have those Senate hearings, and you know there's some validation from Air Force pilots, and particularly over the Atlantic and over oceans and bodies of water that said that they've seen multiple things.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. One is, I'll just start off by saying that I never needed anybody outside of myself or, say, the UFO or
Okay,
experiencer community to validate what I know is
got it.
true, either from investigating UFOs through MUFON or, of course, my personal experiences. A lot of people are like, it's almost as if UFOs won't exist until the government tells
Right.
us they do, and then
Right.
suddenly they will, like magic. They exist now because the
Right.
government said so. It is validation though. It is good to hear. I've been in, I mean, I joined MUFON in 93, but I've always been immersed in
Right.
this topic. And I remember back in the old Larry King show where they would have a guest on his talk show where they said, here's people who've had experiences. And then there'd be somebody else on the show saying, we don't even know that there's planets out there. We
Right.
know there has to be, but we haven't found any. And then now there's planets everywhere that they're finding. And pardon me, it's a progression. It's a slow, steady drip of
Mhm.
disclosure. There's been some real big, like David
I see.
Grush last year
Whistleblower.
was a
Yeah.
gentleman who said that we have craft, there are bodies, and then it's a very tedious dig into those claims to see if anything is
Hmm.
there. So it's slowly moving in a direction. I'm confident that at some point it'll just become obvious, and
Yeah.
so, for the time being, I do what I can to get the word
So
out.
a lot of these things particularly happen at nighttime or over bodies of water. Is there a particular reason why people tend to see these at night and maybe not? And this is just me just seeing videos on YouTube or seeing a news broadcast. They usually happen at night or over an ocean. Is there a particular reason why that happens?
Okay, so first of all, I'll cover the night thing and then the water thing. And this is also true for some of the over water sightings. So it's like an airplane. There's airplanes flying overhead
Right.
all the time. During the daytime, you don't seem to notice them as much because at night, when there's not as much going on in the sky, you see the lights on the
Ah,
airplane. The lights
yeah,
catch your
yeah, yeah.
attention. So I think it's more an aspect of that. And that's a very broad overgeneralization, but generally you're going to notice something with lights on it. And the other thing is for those sightings that are on or over water, there's not a lot
Mhm.
going on around the water. There aren't any, like if you are on the shore looking out over a big lake or the ocean, what have you, and you don't see any lights on the horizon. There's not a lot. There's no trees. There's no
Right.
buildings or anything. So your eyes are looking like, is anything going on in the direction I'm looking? Like, oh, there's a thing and it's
Right.
moving kind of weird. That's different. So there's that. But I will also say that the recent videos that have been disclosed to the public from the military, the ones out over the Atlantic and out over the
Yeah.
Pacific, it's not that there aren't a lot of sightings over the mainland,
Right.
because there are. It's just that when they're testing the waters, again, excuse the pun, testing the waters to see what people think about the phenomena, like what the man on the street thinks about UFOs, they're not going to like say, "Oh my gosh, there was this giant UFO over Chicago." They're going to say, like, out on the ocean, this direction, out on the ocean,
Right.
that direction, there was a thing, and people are like, "Well, that's weird. Glad it was over the ocean." It's like it's like if you saw a
Yeah.
shark, you'd be surprised, but if you said, "Oh, look at this shark out, out in the ocean," you'd be like,
Right,
"Oh, that's a
right,
shark."
right.
Yeah.
I've heard. I watched a documentary on Netflix recently. It escapes the name of me right now, but they said that they actually, because we can't measure the depth of the ocean based on our technology, that UFOs could actually be in the ocean underwater. Is there some validation to that too, as well? That
hmm
the reason why like people see them over bodies of water frequently, or that happens, they're actually coming from the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, for however long we've been here as a species, I'm sure it was very easy for them up until now to just kind of like say, "Oh, here's a high enough mountain. These people can't climb this. Let's hang out here. Let's hang out on the
Mhm.
backside of the moon. They can't even
Right,
see that." All these places that were just sort of easy for them to
right,
hang out, like Antarctica. Nobody's coming here to the center of Antarctica or the bottom
right.
of the ocean. Sure, those are all viable places that would be fairly easy for them, until it's kind of like using the parenthood analogy. It's cute when you see your kid sort of just laying there, your little cute little baby on the ground, but
Oh my
once they're up
goodness.
and walking,
Yeah.
holy cow,
Right. Right.
you know changes
The
changes
world. Yeah.
everything. So yeah, so I think now that we're toddling around, their hidden bases don't have that same luxury that they probably did for thousands of years or however long it's been.
Can you tell us about your work with MUFON? You've been director since since 2004.
Yeah. So, what MUFON does, we're the world's largest civilian UFO research organization in over 40 countries, over 5,000 members now. The organization's been around since 1966. I've not been around since 1966, but MUFON has.
Headquartered in
And
Cincinnati.
so, yeah, right now, yep. And so, when people see something, they can primarily they go to the website and report it, and then we have a field investigator, a well-trained field investigator, a volunteer, but still a trained investigator, reach out to them and try to figure out what it is that they've seen. In Michigan, every year we get about 200 sightings, and our field investigators can identify typically about 90% of what people report. People misidentify airplanes, or they'll see things like Starlink satellites. That's a big one. Drones, Chinese lanterns. Sometimes weather or natural celestial phenomena. And a lot of the time we can identify it, but it's that 10% that's the really interesting stuff that, it keeps you, pardon me, a little bit of cough, really keeps you motivated and interested in it. So since I've been state director in 2004, Michigan has gotten a little over 4,000 sightings into us. And so, it's never dull moment.
Right.
I'll put it
And
that
so,
way.
and I know in '94, Michigan had those sightings that were over Muskegon, I believe, where they said that, and it was multiple people said they saw something at that time. And it's, I don't recall that. I was only about 11, 12 years old when those instances were taking place. So I'm only finding out some of this information as I got older and started, researching your background and this phenomenon. Because with all due respect, a lot of times it wasn't that you didn't believe that there was something that was available out there. And yes, the government didn't validate it, but it kind of, now that it came pseudo mainstream, as well as more people who have no agenda said, I've seen something and this is unexplainable to me. I mean, you have a heart, even, and I say this respectfully, maybe they don't believe the kid in bed, but they'll believe the Air Force pilot, right? And that means, because an Air Force pilot has no, like, he's like, our technology couldn't even chase that thing in air. And you're like, it blows your mind. And you see the video of it, you're like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, that 1994 case it was March 8th, 94, had over 300 witnesses to it. The Muskegon National Weather Service tracked it on radar. All sorts of people, over 60 people, made calls into 911 about it, which is huge, right? Because, you hear that and like, okay, people called 911, but you think about it, and people called the same number they call if somebody's trying to break into their house, or they've fallen and they can't get up, because they saw something in the sky that impressed them. That means they were really impressed by what was going on in the sky to call 911. There was a great piece on it done by Unsolved Mysteries. Maybe is a bit of a boast because I helped put it together, but there was a solid episode just on that March 8th, 1994 case in Michigan. That
I know they have a new incarnation. The music itself would make like, literally, it was the music. Even like now, I see it on Netflix. And obviously, God bless Robert Stack, but I'm like, I don't know if I really want to tune into that one more, because that wasn't an easy experience as a kid.
And it's kind of funny too. I'll just add that I joined MUFON in the fall of '93, and in the spring of '94 is when that event happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be like this all the time.
But so in order to be a field investigator, I saw the qualification, not the actual qualifications. There's a 65 question exam, and then there's a background check. So you have some really credible people from backgrounds to make sure that you're getting people who genuinely want to do this, and it's not just somebody off the street.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people that, just like anything, they pick up a hobby. Say they think they're going to golf or something. They go all in and they buy all this expensive stuff, and then they're like, maybe not. And then it just sort of sits there. So we want some sort of investment before we just let anybody have access to be able to receive
Yeah,
information
absolutely.
and manage it responsibly and be responsible with the people that are reporting
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question. I know we're running on time a little here, but I just had one more quick question for you. How has the resources from the state changed since you started, or states that other people have been in since the beginning of when you started or got into this, and now that there's congressional hearings about it, and now it's becoming more, there's something there, and there's an actual push from a wider spread. You can't just hide this from a government level. Have you seen any resources change at a state level?
Well, there's a lot going on dynamically right now. Let me say for the international organization, because there's the international that is
Right.
worldwide, or to the extent that we're worldwide. We're mostly based in the US, understandably. And then each state or province or whatever has its own
Correct.
chapter in it. And Michigan's always been a really strong, independent chapter. At the international level, there's a fee to join. There's a fee to be a field investigator. That's how you have to become a
Yeah.
field investigator in joining the international organization. Economically, we found that people don't have as much easy money. It's just a
Right.
phase the economy is
Right.
going through. Maybe that'll turn around, maybe not. So there's a lot of people that say, hey, put me on your
Right.
email list, or I'd like to attend your
Yeah.
Zoom meetings, things like that. But otherwise, I mean, we've generally had about 100 people that I would really consider
Hmm.
members at any
Right.
given time. That number really hasn't grown or shrank, interestingly, as much as either when we try to put
Right.
effort into it or we completely ignore it. That number seems to remain about the same. But so many people are interested and say, hey, just put me on an email list and I'd like to hear more of it. I don't know if that
Right.
addresses your question, but I would think, yeah, the level of interest would indicate. And we do have some very generous, wonderful people who donate, because that's how the state chapter runs, by
Right.
donations. Some wonderful donations that
Right.
come into us, really something. However, if we were to rely on the membership based model where we ask people to
The
have to
dues and
pay a
things.
specific amount to participate, dues exactly, that number is not
Right.
reliable
Understood.
currently. The interest is there, but not
Yeah, the
everybody has
financial
the money
commitment's a
these
different
days.
thing. So, that I really appreciate your time. I would love to have a follow up with you about this, just because I think that there's so much I could dive into, and your experiences with it. But for the sake of your schedule and your time, I'll save that for our next conversation. So, did you have any questions for me?
No, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Bill